before I came to New York and started working with the Indypendent, I already had a background in daily journalism as a general news reporter, but I had also spent many years traveling and living a nomadic life, bouncing around the United States and traveling to various other countries as well, as a hitchhiker, a migrant farm worker, a street juggler, and various other things. And also, participated in political protests. I was at the Seattle WTO protests in 1999, and I think I was at a point where by 2000 I was, looking to settle down and be in one place more, and be more a part of a community, and that's when I came across the Indypendent, which was in a very nascent stage. It just come out with their first proto issue called The Unstated. The woman who who brought together Unstated, her name was Amba, and she in particular encouraged me to join up with what was just getting underway. And it was in that moment, the Indypendent was a part of a larger global media project called Indy Media, and we were actually the print arm of the New York City chapter of Indy Media. And initially the paper was 4 pages, black and white, and it had very much of a sort of an open door approach to things. All sorts of people were getting involved. I think for myself, and I think a lot of people, there was a lot of a sense that the dominant commercial media didn't speak to a lot of the things we cared about, didn't ask the questions we asked about our government or why our society was run the way it is, and here in New York didn't cover a lot of important issues for ordinary working New Yorkers. When I was in Seattle WTO, I wrote about it some afterwards, but I actively participated in the blockades and all the direct actions that were going on. And when I saw the media coverage, I was appalled. It didn't reflect what I saw or experienced, or why people were out in the streets, taking the risks they were. And it sort of reinforced my sense that the desire to create media and media outlets that would really give a voice to the I guess maybe the more rebellious side of society, and that would ask harder questions of government and corporations and the powers that be, that the media often overlooks or doesn't delve into. So the Indypendent, so that was I guess sort of the animating vision. That's what I felt. That Amba Nogueira felt it. Other people that were getting involved, I think we all had that sort of common sort of baseline understanding of sort of what the problem was with the media in this country and in this city, and we felt we could forge something different that could really stand out and be an important counter voice and counter narrative to the sort of the conventional status quo. The Indy's been blessed by good fortune at various times in its history, and at the very beginning, when New York City Indy Media was getting started, there was someone who was an early fan of Indy Media, who had been at Seattle WTO, who had a lease on a loft space, a 2,000 square foot loft space over on East 29th Street near Park Avenue, and the space had a small kitchenette, a shower, various rooms, and being New York, some of us didn't either have the money or the desire to rent and pay a lot of money to live in an apartment, so we were living out of the Indy Media office. There was various nooks and crannies in the office where you could throw down a mattress and call it home, and it made for a short commute. And I my nook was a 3x8 my nook was a 3x8 storage. My nook was a unheated 3x8 storage closet in the back of the office, and I had a mattress in there, and when I would be done with work in the day, I would go back to the storage closet and pass out. And I didn't realize it my first winter because there was a bookshelf there was a hole in the wall. I was like, God, it gets so cold here in the winter, because I have like 7 or 8 blankets on, and like wake up whenever I would wake up, and was breathing smoke out of my mouth. And I eventually figured, when we removed the bookshelf, I realized there was a hole in the wall, and I stuffed it with an extra pillow. Things probably got about 10 degrees warmer in there. So we had that office space for the first 5 years of the paper. And the number of people living in that space fluctuated anywhere from 3 to 7. And I lived there for 29 months. I think I hold the record for the longest stint at the office. So, the first 8 years of the paper, I was all in and there every day, chugging away, working with, all kinds of folks. And then I got an opportunity to go to work for a labor union newspaper here in New York in 2009, over at the union that represents faculty at the University of New York. And that was a great position. I got to meet all sorts of interesting, brilliant people and do a lot of good work. And at the same time, I stayed involved with the Indypendent as much as I could. I still wrote some articles, helped with editing, other tasks, when I had free time. In the beginning of 2014, I decided to come back to the Indypendent as the paper's executive editor. At that time, I felt like the Indy still had a lot of unrealized potential, and I felt like I could help it realize that. I also felt that we were headed for an upsurge of left-wing activism and movements in the coming years. That was my sense of things, even in 2013, when I started really kind of thinking about this. And I felt like the Indypendent could be a vital voice in that upsurge. Well, definitely some of the fuel that keeps my fire burning is a deep frustration with our dominant media system in this country. I think it varies from somewhere between mediocre to awful, and I feel like there needs to be a voice for a whole other way of seeing the world and seeing the events of the day, and a voice in particular that really takes seriously the role and the contributions that social justice movements make to the life of the city and country and to the world. The dominant, the corporate media tends to ignore or marginalize radical movements, and they don't really understand them because most conventional journalists have never participated in them. A big part of what is often missing in the corporate media is any sense of context or history, any ability to understand issues more deeply. And so I think that's what we try to bring into the paper as well. I think a big challenge for us and for left media in general is how to walk this thin line between being able to communicate with activists and be a place where they see their issues and actions and concerns reflected, but also convey that in a way that people who do not consider themselves to be full-time activists also find interesting and engaging. And it's difficult because the language and the mentality of activism can be its own subculture. And I think part of what makes the paper interesting is that we constantly do navigate those two worlds and try to produce a paper that's interesting and meaningful both to activists as well as people who aren't activists but might be curious, like, well, why is the world the way it is, or why is the government starting this war, or why did we just have another economic crash, or why am I about to get thrown out of my apartment? The Indy's been a magnet for people who are willing to be a part of a larger collective effort. People that are able to, not let their individual ego get in the way of a larger collective project that we're all a part of. So we've just had over the years people come, they participate, they do good work, and then often move on to other things. But we've been very fortunate that kind of have wave after wave of people come through the paper over the years, and some people are able to put in 6 or 12 months, other people 2, 3, 4 years. Some people have been doing this for 10, 15, 18, and 20 years, like myself. The Indy is pretty unique as a paper that creates a space for volunteers and for people. We attract volunteers that have no journalism experience and want to kind of learn the craft. We also sometimes we've attracted people that have some experience but are looking for a place to kind of really spread their wings and show the world what they can do, maybe before they move on to other outlets. We have very small staff, but we do dedicate a lot of time to working with volunteers, because it's one thing to have an open door. I think another part of why we've been able to rejuvenate is having a staff that can kind of guide people, mentor them, when they're going out and doing their first stories, point them to sources and all of that kind of stuff. And I feel like over time we've built up institutional memory and credibility across the city. Our knowledge of, especially of New York, has greatly increased. The exciting thing is seeing how often fairly quickly people become more confident and capable and really flourish. But for myself, when I'm working with new writers, I guess I kind of call it there's a method where I try to talk to them, understand both where their interests lie, as well as get a sense of where their skill set is at this point when they're starting. And then for myself, I try to steer people toward what I think. I try to keep my antenna up for the kind of articles I think they would be most interested in, and that at their current skill set that they could handle. Something I try to do when people go out to cover is I stay in touch with them, ask, get their, I debrief with them about what they heard and saw, and maybe provide some pointers on like how they might want to structure their article. But I really try to also listen to what they're, excited and interested in when they've gone and covered something. With the voices we promote in the paper, we try to give the voices to people from below. Our vision is fundamentally kind of from the bottom looking up instead of the top looking down. Individuals have particular life experiences they want to share. We feel are important for our readers to hear about. We try to also provide a platform for that, but I would say the largest part of what we try to give voice to are movements for collective change, for empowerment, and because nothing can fundamentally change you can't win battles against the power structure without collective action. So that's in particular the groups and the movements that are acting collectively, fighting for change, fighting for justice. We want to give them a voice, and we've been pretty consistent about that. At the Indypendent, we call ourselves a free paper for free people, and the paper has always been free since the very first edition. And that's very simple, because we want as many people as possible to be reading it and getting the information and analysis we're providing. A secondary reason is by having a larger circulation, it enables us to attract more progressive advertising money, and I think it also excites people who donate to the paper. They feel like, okay, I'm helping a project that's reaching tens of thousands of people every month. I think something that's sort of been a hallmark of the Indy from its earliest days is a combination of idealism and practicality. Like to publish a newspaper, you need a certain amount of money. You can't. The resources you need to publish a paper cannot be found at the bottom of a dumpster. You have to raise a certain amount of money. You have to be organized. So we embraced that challenge, and that's part of why we grew over time, is especially around issues of finance and organization. We were willing to evolve and grow. We didn't take a completely knee-jerk stance that money is inherently evil. It's like, well, if you use it with good intentions, then it can do good things, and obtaining the extra resources can be a good thing. And I think that's important for the left in general. I think part of the value of the Indy's experiences over these last 2 decades is not just as a unique journalism project, but I think it offers valuable lessons for the left in general, that to endure and flourish over time, you need to have a combination of idealism and practicality, and you have to figure out how to navigate those sort of two poles. You don't want to become so practical that you end up just becoming cynical, but on the other hand, you don't want to be so idealistic that you refuse to do like common sense things that will enable your survival. So publishing the Indy over 2 decades, it's been challenging in a number of ways. In particular, financial. Left-wing media is not a place where people go to get rich, and like many other organizations, we've faced various financial challenges and crises over the years, and have been a bit like the cat with 9 lives that has been able to survive and move forward and grow. But certainly at this time, with the pandemic and the economic collapse that we're seeing all around us, it's definitely a challenging time for us. Whether we can survive this and still be here in the future, it's going to depend a lot on what happens now, and building out a broader base of support among our readers. We have a lot of generous supporters, but we also have a lot of people who read the paper and haven't ever contributed. And I think there's people that have been reading it for years, and maybe they feel like, oh, that's somebody else is taking care of that. I already gave to this other group. But really, if you like reading the paper, if you value what you see and read in the paper, please understand that paper can only be in your hands because people like yourself gave money and gave life to this paper to be able to continue publishing, because we put a lot of heart and soul into this, and we're very thrifty and economical, but at the end of the day it takes a certain amount of money and resources to be able to do this. Think about why you enjoy reading the paper, all the information, analysis, the beautiful artwork, all of that you see in the paper that makes the Indy so unique. When you give, you make that possible. You take on a small part of the responsibility of helping ensure the Indy survives and can flourish. And I think another thing that the Indy does, beyond providing information or analysis or a platform for talented young journalists to flourish, is it's really at the heart of a whole community. Something that is especially strong here in New York, because it's such a large city, is it's very easy to become siloed, and maybe in your neighborhood or in the group you're involved with. But each month we offer our readers this larger vision of all these different movements that are fighting for change and sharing their analysis and information about what they're doing, the larger community that exists around the paper and that the paper serves. And when you give at this time of economic and social crisis, you ensure that community continues to exist and flourish. And God knows we're going to need progressive communities to survive and flourish in these coming years, because this is going to be a challenging decade for our country and for the world.